In a previous video, I talked about a surprising behavior that can happen when you're using this assert view has helper and you're trying to test for a null value like that. If you haven't seen that video, go watch that one first because it's going to kind of set up the next thing I want to show today, which is some other unexpected behavior you might get when comparing data of mixed types. So let's set this up. Over here, we have a demo controller. And all it's doing is it's returning a view with a single piece of view data called suspicious request. And for the purposes of this demo, I have it calling some made up function that's going to return some possible values. So let me change this. So let's say it's doing this. Now this is bad code, but I see all sorts of code like this in real world apps all the time. But if we look at this function, really what can happen is we can get three possible values back. We can get true, we can get false, or we can get the literal string no. Again, you're probably cringing, but let's just run with this because it'll demonstrate the problem that can happen with those test helpers. So, and for the rest of this example, let's just get rid of this function call. I just did this to kind of set up a little bit of logic. But let's say this is returning true. Okay, so it is a suspicious request. Over here in my test, if I say assert true, and I run my test, it passes. Great, everything's working as expected. But if I change this to that weird literal string called no, and I run my test, what do you think will happen? I think most people would assume this is going to fail because no is definitely not true, right? But if I run this, the test passes. So before I tell you how to fix this, let's see what's happening. If I go into this helper, assert view has, let me shrink this down. It's doing a bunch of things, and there's basically all these different checks. Depending on what value you pass in and what type it is, it can go down some different paths. But ultimately, this final path in the if-else chain is going to be evaluated if it's a simple string, Boolean, literal value like that, right? And all this is doing is making a call to PHP unit and its assertion, assert equals. So why is that interesting? Assert equals is basically doing this. Notice this is a double equals. It's not a triple. So it's doing a loose comparison. So it's doing type juggling. And because the true comes first, the no is going to get cast into a truthy Boolean value because any non-empty string is considered to be truthy. So like true equals literally any non-empty string. All right, so that's just how PHP does loose comparison. What we really want, what would save us, is if we had the triple equals, right? So there's three equals there. That is now a strict comparison, and this would just fail right off the bat because if you're doing a strict comparison and they're two different types, they can't possibly be equal. That's what we want. That's not what assert view has gives us. So before I show you how to update this test helper to fix that, I just want to point out, in reality, what I would hope you would do in this particular example is just change this to false, right? If your method can only return a Boolean, and that's what's getting passed into the view data, then it doesn't matter that your test comparison operator is loose because they are the same type. There's no type coercion that has to happen. There's no possibility for that weird, unexpected behavior. So first and foremost, if you can clean up your code logic to just avoid type juggling, you'll be fine. But let's say you can't, right? Because sometimes the data is coming out of a method we don't control, or to refactor that isn't practical, or sometimes, frankly, a value has to return a mixed type for various reasons. What you can do ends up being very similar to what we did for the other solution, which is to use the closure and just say val triple equals true. So if I run this, now my test fails, right? And so that's doing what I expect it to do. If I do that, it should pass now. So that's the solution. Clean up your code if you can, but if not, you can use the closure to use the strict comparison operator if that's what you need.